Somebody asked me last month to chain two of my own lines together, his traffic in through one Singapore modem, out through a second one, on the theory that two proxies are twice as private as one. That would have been two lines instead of one, twice the invoice, and I wanted the sale. I told him not to. Chaining does work. I have built two chains in 3 years that were the right answer, and neither was built to hide harder. What he wanted was protection from the site he was scraping. A chain gives you none of that. It gives you protection from me and from whoever I buy from, which is a different problem with a much smaller audience. Why I am the one saying this. I sell mobile proxy lines here in Singapore. Real SIM cards on carrier plans, about $10 a month each in data, modems on a powered hub in my flat, another $50 a month per line in hardware, which makes me one of the boxes in a chain. I know what my gateway can see about a customer, because I wrote the parts of it that write to disk. I also scrape for my own sites, so I have been the person building the chain and the person selling one leg of it, sometimes in the same week. What a chain actually is: your client opens a connection to the first proxy proxy opens a connection to the second one opens a connection to the site, 3 hops instead of 2, and every byte in both directions crosses all of them. That is the entire mechanism. No extra encryption and no second identity. It is one tunnel handed to another tunnel. People picture something more elaborate, and the disappointment lives in the gap. The target sees exactly one thing, worth being blunt here. The site you are hitting sees the address of the last proxy in the line. That is all. It has no idea whether that address was reached by your laptop or through 4 boxes in 3 countries. Nothing in an HTTP request carries a hop count. A chain leaves your tier-less signature and your header order exactly where they were. So against the target, a chain adds 0. The exit address is the whole story either way, and the burnt exit sitting behind a clean first hop is still a burnt exit. If a site is blocking you today, a second proxy in front of your current one will not move that number by a single request. What does change is who knows what. Here is the property that is genuinely real. The first proxy sees your address, it knows who you are, it watches your timing and your volume, and it sees the second proxy. It never sees the site you ended up on. The second proxy sees the site, every hostname, and every full request if the traffic is plain HTTP. It does not see you. As far as it is concerned, its customer is the first proxy. Neither box holds both halves. That is the whole value of chaining, stated honestly. You have split one piece of knowledge across 2 companies, so no single breach or subpoena or board employee walks away with the pair. So the adversary is your own provider. Read that back and notice who you are defending against. It is me, or the company I resell from, or the second provider, or whoever holds their logs after they go out of business. If you have no live reason to distrust the company you buy from, a chain solves a problem you do not have, at a cost you will definitely have. Almost everyone who asked me about chaining has never said that adversary out loud. They want to be safer in a general direction, which is not the direction. The first case where it is right. 2 situations where I think a chain earns its cost. Here is the first. You need an exit somewhere you cannot reach directly. That sounds exotic and it is not. I have hit it twice. One provider's gateway would not answer from a Singapore address for reasons their support desk could not explain, and it answered the moment I came at it through a box in Europe. The other supported address allowed listing only, no credentials, while my workers were auto-scaling and picking up a fresh address on every start. An allow list cannot describe that shape. One small static box in front, whitelisted once, everything else routed through it, and the problem goes away. Both of those are chains. Both were built for reachability, a plumbing problem with a plumbing answer, and privacy never came into either decision. The second case, and the check nobody runs, the second one is the knowledge split, done deliberately. You decide that no single company gets to connect your identity to your destinations, so you buy the first hop from one seller and the second from another, and you pay the cost knowingly. That reasoning holds. It holds only while the 2 companies are actually separate. Which is where it falls apart, because this business is mostly resellers. A small number of outfits own real infrastructure. A much larger number buy from them wholesale, put their own dashboard on top, and price it their own way. Two brands with different sites and different plans can be two front doors on one pool. If that is what you bought, you have paid twice for a chain with one owner, and that owner sees both ends. The split you thought you built is decorative, so check before the second invoice. Look at the us and the exits announced and see whether both sellers land on the same one. Compare the dashboards, because white label panels come from a handful of products and they look it. Check the billing entity on your card statement, which is harder to rebrand than a website. And ask each seller who they buy from, then notice which one will not answer. None of that is proof. It catches the lazy cases, and the lazy cases are the majority. What it costs, starting with the clock. Now the bill. Every hop adds its own round trip, and a chain sums the legs instead of averaging them in both directions, because the response comes home the same road it went out on. My Singapore line to a Singapore target runs in a few tenths of milliseconds. Put a European box in the middle, and you pay the Singapore to Europe leg going out and again coming back. A page that came back in about 200 milliseconds went to roughly 600 on a job I measured last year. On a scraper, working through a queue one request at a time, that is the difference between finishing overnight and not finishing. Then the failure surface, this is the part that decides it for me. Uptime multiplies. Two legs at 99% each give you a chain at about 98, and you have doubled your bad days without buying anything the target can perceive. It is worse than the arithmetic suggests, because the failures correlate in ways multiplication knows nothing about. A rotation on the far provider ends your session. A maintenance window on the near one stops every worker at once. Either subscription lapsing takes down the whole path at midnight, and you now have two vendors. When it breaks, you have to work out which one to write to before you can open the ticket, and each will tell you to ask the other. I have been on the receiving end of that. The customer opens a ticket, my side is clean for the whole window he is complaining about, and I cannot see 1 meter into the leg he bought from somebody else. All I can tell him is that it is not us, which from where he sits is exactly what a bad provider would say. Debugging gets a third suspect. The errors get harder in a specific way. With one proxy in the path, there are two machines that can produce a response, and separating them is the main diagnostic skill in this work. I have a whole piece on which status codes belong to which box, and I am not rebuilding it here. With two proxies, there are three machines. The same status code now has three possible authors, and most of the tests that separate a provider error from a target error quietly assume one provider. The 407 rule survives because only a proxy can send one. It no longer tells you which proxies. The timing test survives in a weaker form. Anything faster than a full chain round trip was manufactured inside the chain, and which of the two boxes wrote it you still cannot say. So log the hops as separate fields if you are going to run one. First hop, second hop. Connect time for each leg. Without that, you are picking one machine out of three from a single string, and the string does not know either. The assumption underneath all of it. Here is the honest limit. The split holds only while neither provider keeps records. The moment one of them logs, and the two sets ever get compared, the thing you paid for is gone. You cannot verify that. No request you send through a gateway reveals whether it wrote a line to disk. And no logs claim is a paragraph on a marketing page, and I have a marketing page. What you can look at is where the company is registered and how long it has been trading. That is context, not evidence, and treating it as evidence is how people end up feeling protected while being written down twice. So if your threat model genuinely includes a provider who keeps logs and hands them over, a chain relocates that problem. You now need two sellers who do not log, and you can verify neither. Where I come down. You almost certainly do not need this. I say that as the person who would invoice you twice for it. 2 lines beats 1 on my side, and I still talk people out of it. Most times it comes up. The reason you suspect you might need it is usually a threat model you have never written down. So write it. 1 sentence. Who is the adversary? What do they learn about you? And what happens to you next? 9 times out of 10, that sentence lands on something a chain does not touch. The site might block my exits. My provider might oversell the pool and hand me a slow line. I would rather my scraping was not traceable to my company name. None of those improve with the second proxy in the path. When it comes out right, it reads roughly like this. I do not want a company that knows my identity to also hold a list of hosts I visited. That is a coherent worry. Chaining is a direct answer to it, and if that describes you, then the extra latency and the doubled failure rate are a fair price. Everyone else is buying two of something to solve a problem they have not named yet. I would rather sell you one line that works. What I cannot tell you, two things I have not tested and will not pretend about. I have never run a 3-hop chain in production. People do, the uptime arithmetic gets ugly quickly, and I have no measurements of my own on whether a third split buys anything real, and I cannot promise you that any given pair of sellers is unrelated. I can tell you how I check, and that I have been wrong about it once. Two brands I had treated as separate turned out to be answering support from the same desk, and I caught it because the same slightly odd phrase showed up in replies from both. I caught that by luck, and luck is a poor thing to build a privacy design on. The checks I run on a pair of providers before I will chain them, and the per hop log fields that make a chain debuggable, are at proxyscraping.org. Subscribe for more on proxies for scraping.